Okay. Thank you, everybody. Welcome back. We still have a number of items on the agenda to go, so we're moving forward as quickly as we can. The next item, I believe, on the agenda is a delegation by Mr. Adam Layton of Evans Planning on official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application for 13572 and 586 Bayview Avenue, which is 1310 in the agenda. And I see Mr. Layton is there. Hello, Mr. Layton. You've got 5 minutes to address council. Go ahead when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. As indicated, I am here to delegate with respect to the proposed applications at 13572 and 13586 Bayview Avenue. We're the planning consultant on behalf of the owners of the property. And we're here today to speak to the recommendation report from staff recommending approval of the official plan amendment and approval in principle of the zoning bylaw amendment. We have no concerns with the recommendations of staff. We support them wholeheartedly. And I will just quickly run through my presentation. If I could have the next slide, please. Subject property is located on the west side of Bayview Avenue, just south of Bloomington Road. It's the area highlighted in blue on the imagery on the screen. We have various views taken or shown. The property is primarily surrounded by a wetland complex to the west and to the north, and partially to the south, with some other detached dwellings to the south along Bayview. Next slide, please. This just shows the transit connectivity. And I would also note that in addition to the transit stops, a lot like shown on the screen, there is a business case that we understand York Region Transit has put forward, which is investigating the potential for increased transit frequency along Bayview Avenue. We also understand that Bayview forms part of the lake-to-lake cycling route, which would implement a multi-use pathway along Bayview, and further that the subject property is within a short drive of multiple GO stations, thereby affording residents with the transit connectivity to use the services for intra-regional connections. Moving on to the next slide, brief summary of why we're here today. As indicated, we are seeking an official plan amendment to permit an increase in the permitted building height from 4 stories to 8 stories, not including the mechanical penthouse, as well as an increased density based on the lot area. And I will get to that on a future slide. We would note there was a prior official plan amendment for the site, which permitted a 4-story apartment building with an increased density that was approved in the past. There has been a concurrent zoning bylaw amendment application, and we are just putting the finishing touches on a site plan control submission that will hopefully be provided in short order, as well as a draft plan of condominium. Next slide, please. We have the proposed development plan shown here in context. And as I indicated, there is a wetland that's located to the north and west of the property, as well as a small wetland finger that extends along the south. The limits of the wetland have been confirmed by a site walk in 2020 that included both city and TRCA staff. The limits of the wetland were forwarded to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, and they've accepted these limits. And the proposed buffer from the wetland is 30 meters, with the minor exception being the wetland finger, which I understand is only about 10 meters wide itself, but we are providing a 10-meter buffer from that portion. So in total, while the site area is just over 1 hectare, or approximately 11,000 square meters in size, we're actually conveying about 0.6 of a hectare, or 1.5 acres, or 56% of the site to protection, to afford the protection of this feature. And as you see on the screen, there is a very robust naturalization replanting plan that is to occur, which will actually convert some of what is currently manicured lawn into a more vegetated area. Moving along to the next slide is just a more schematic view of the proposed building. You'll see the terracing does occur towards the north, thereby moving the tallest portion of the building away from the detached residential uses to the south. Single driveway access is contemplated from Bayview, which internalizes the pickup and drop off and parking. Moving to the next slide is some conceptual massing, which also shows the location of parking. There would be no underground parking component. It would all be above grade. So there's no need for permanent dewatering. and water balance would be achieved through low impact development measures, including an underground cistern, which would actually provide a more consistent and controlled release of groundwater and infiltration into the wetland. Moving to the next slide, we have conceptual building elevations. And probably more important is the next slide, which shows the angular plane from the south. As noted in the staff report, by and large, the building complies with a 45-degree angular plane from the adjacent property, but with a minor projection, mostly by the parking garage and by outdoor terraces. Moving along, we have some aerial views. This is from looking northwest. The next slide is looking northeast. And the slide is the documented area, and that is my time.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Layton. So given that the two delegates were moved to the other issue with it, Mr. Layton is the only one on this one. So we'll bring this back to council. This is in Ward 1. So we'll bring this back to local councillor, Councillor Barros.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we've got this application here, and at the council public meeting, I kind of spoke about areas in Oak Ridges where something like this could actually work. And I had said that, you know what, this is one of the places this could work. And then I spent the majority of my time speaking about, however, the environment has to be considered. If the environment can't be considered, it doesn't matter if this is a good location or not for a building like this. And we then sent all of our comments back to staff, and staff worked with the applicant and everyone else, and they came up with this report. So I'm just going to go through 4 pieces of the report, Mr. Mayor, that I thought was of the most important. So the first one I'm reading says the Toronto and Regional Conservation Authority and the city's Parks and Natural Heritage Planning section have reviewed the subject development proposal, including the aforementioned supporting studies, which are attached to it, and have identified no objections with respect to the proposed development limits as identified above. Accordingly, staff is satisfied that the proposed development will not result in negative impacts to the greenway system. And then it goes on that there's quite a bit of land that will need to be dedicated to a public body at no expense. And it says the land to be conveyed will be required to be restored and enhanced to the satisfaction of the city and the TRCA. I then move on, and it says on page 7, if anyone's following, staff has evaluated the applicant's revised development proposal in relation to the land use, design, and compatibility policies of the plan and is satisfied that the proposal has regard for and is compatible with existing development in the area. As noted above, the test of compatibility under the plan, the official plan, does not require that new development be exactly the same as what currently exists on adjacent lands. In this regard, the proposed development shall provide for a building type that is envisioned in the plan. And the proposed built form represents an appropriate contextual fit with the existing neighborhood and surrounding land uses. Then I flip down and I'm on page 12, which goes into 13, comments from the TRCA, Toronto Regional Conservation Authority. They say the subject lands are located within the TRCA's regulated area, and as such, a permit will be required from the TRCA with respect to any proposed works to occur within the regulated limit in accordance with Ontario Regulation 16606. The TRC recommends the transfer of the natural system where appropriate into public ownership and has also provided various technical comments related to such matters as storm storage facilities, storm quality control, and erosion sediment, among other things, to be addressed as part of the site plan application. So later on, not in this. And then I finish off here. I'm on page, the end of page 8. Yeah. Staff has carefully reviewed the applicant's development proposal and considers that the proposed land use and built form are appropriate and compatible with existing land uses within the adjacent and surrounding area. On the basis of the preceding, staff is of the opinion that the revised development proposal has appropriate regard for and is consistent with the overarching planning principles of the plan and that it represents good planning. So as I read the report, I was quite surprised, because I had thought that going into this, the location's great, but I didn't think that the environmental concerns were going to actually get us to a point of seeing an application here today. But we have it. The TRCA has said they have no issues. They've given technical comments as to how things should be done. The city has said it's good planning, that it works in the area. So given all that, I was looking for reasons to vote no. To be honest, I was looking for reasons to vote no. But the report is very clear, and I am going to support the report. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll move a motion to accept the staff report and endorse it. And I would also move, and it may be just technical in nature, but that all the comments be received from residents and they be forwarded on to staff, because there's still a lot of work to do in the site plan application portion of this. And I want to make sure that those comments are still relevant to staff when they're working on the site plan with this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clerk, do you have that slightly modified, I suppose, motion from what was in the staff report?
If we don't need the detail of, and the comment be referred back to staff, if that was already accepted as part of the consolidated agenda, just leave that. We don't need it. I just wanted to make sure I publicly said that those comments are not being left by the wayside.
It's a good point.
They are going to staff because there's a lot of work to still do.
Yep. No, it's a good point. And I agree. It probably doesn't need to be in the motion, but it's bears repeating. Okay. I need a seconder for that motion at this point. Okay. Councillor Munch, you want to speak to it?
Once again, I'm going to try to support the local councillor on when they work hard and they have a certain position as much as possible. And like I've done consistently pretty much everywhere, when people have a good committed to the community and engagement and they're asking for help, and I'm happy to do so. So happy to second the motion and for discussion and engagement. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Is there anybody else? Councillor Silovitz?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Mr. Layton for bringing this forward, and I want to thank everybody who wrote in about this and my contacts with the principals. Thank you very much. I look at this very differently. While I absolutely respect the staff recommendations, I respect what our parks people have to say and the TRCA people. I am of the opinion that this is not a development that should happen here. These are environmentally sensitive lands. We need to protect our wetlands, protect the Oak Ridges Moraine, and protect the Greenbelt. And so for this one, I'm going to be a no, and I have to do that on principle. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Councillor Chan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the applicant and also the agent who spoke. But I also want to thank, I believe, on item 13.21, 13.22, there's a total, if I calculate correctly, is 98 correspondence that from people who live close by, which haven't been referenced so far, stated that their concern and objection. I struck over this one because this applicant looks back has demonstrated willing to work with our staff, I presumably with the local councillor, and I believe with the community. It goes from 11 story now to 8 story. I will have no hesitation if it stayed within the limit of what is now permitted. I believe up to 6 or 5. Now, I know this is different than what the applicants hoped for. I share the comment by Councillor Sivolitz, and I read it carefully. TRCA, as cited by a local councillor, appears to be satisfied a number of things. However, I also noted that there are still a number of things to be further required by TLCA to be satisfied. And particularly, one would say, "Oh yeah, we can deal with it at the site plan situation." But we talk about comments, so I make my comments. And this is not something final in a sense from TLCA perspective. As I read the report, it still needs to be looking at a number of things, I believe, including the erosion plan, as well as on a number of other things that was indicated. Now, one thing that perhaps through Mr. Chair, perhaps this may be direct to our staff or maybe to the applicant's planner still here. Maybe I missed it in the report. How is it going to help the city to meet this affordable housing target, to you, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Kwan, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I actually would redirect the question to the consultant to deal with that specific issue. I don't have the information on the tenure or makeup of the units.
Okay, is Mr. Layton, is that who you're referring to? Okay, is Mr. Layton still with us?
Oh, yeah, he's coming on.
Okay, Mr. Layton, did you hear what was said there, or do you need the question restated?
Yes, I believe it was with respect to affordability.
Right.
So generally, while I'm not privy to the specific pricing or marketing or, those factors that go into determining the cost of the units, I would generally refer to the notion of intrinsic affordability, which was a matter that was reviewed in the previous iteration of the York Region Official Plan. I believe the reference may have been removed from the current draft. But which talks about, when compared to other forms of ground-related housing, apartment units could be considered to be more affordable. I would also note that with respect to the varied size and again tenure and makeup of the proposal, it would also contribute to the diversification of housing options and certainly the availability of housing options within the local community as well.
Thank you for the answer. As I stated, I personally, honestly struggle on this because one of the, I guess, artisan illustration is like, this building would be surrounded by the greeneries. And it's almost like, oh, gee, I want a unit of that when I retire, or whatever that may be. Having said that, I do take comfort and in the report, it did say there's no negative impacts on the Greenway system, and I already mentioned about TLCA initial satisfaction. As I indicated, they still need TLCA satisfaction, in particular coming up with an appropriate and robust restoration plan for natural heritage system. I don't make it up, it's in the report. So on one hand, I would say, yeah, go for it. On the other hand, I am still concerned about the height itself, and it's not final sign off by TLCA. But thank you, Mr. Mayor, for me to ask those questions. Those are my question and comment at this point in time.
Okay.
I'm struggling.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other members of council at this time? Yeah, this is time for council, though. Is there any other members of council that would like to speak to this?
Can I just provide a clarification to my colleague at the other side there?
Do it quickly. Go ahead.
Okay, if you're looking at page 7 of the report, it says section 3.1.5.3, and it speaks to housing. And it does say, while the subject development proposal does not provide an affordable housing component, it does contemplate a range of unit sizes ranging from 1-bedroom to 3-bedroom units. The proposed 3-bedroom units will comprise approximately 20% of the total proposed number of units, which would contribute to a diversified range of housing typologies and sizes within the city. So it's right in the report there, the answer that my colleague's looking for. But I think the bigger answer there is it provides the range of housing where we've got seniors and even families that want to sell their home, but they can't move into a 500 square foot condo at Yonge and 7.
Okay,
So this provides that range.
Thank you.
Just from what I was reading in the report.
Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to this at this time? Okay, Councillor Pirelli.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, when I first saw this application, I said, I don't see how the TRCA is ever going to provide their approval for this. And yet, here we are today, and the TRCA is a fierce protector of the environment. For the TRCA to say, yeah, we're good. That's amazing. I'm sure that Commissioner Kwan and his staff would not have made a recommendation here today without those assurities from the TRCA. That's a huge component. I like Councillor Chan's comments, you know, retirement. This is going to be sorry, Councillor, now you made me laugh. I like his comment that, you know, if he retires, that, you know, this is a place to be. There's a lot of truth to that. I mean, this is going to be surrounded by green space. What a beautiful setting, you know, to live in, to look out your balcony and see, you know, acres and acres of green space protected forever. I like the fact that they're giving away 0.6 hectares of their land to the Conservation Authority forever to be protected. That to me is a big bonus in their possession. That's really good for the environment and for Richmond Hill. I'd be remiss if I didn't comment on the 20% 3 bedrooms. As a professional landlord myself, up until recently, I'm retiring. It's impossible to find 3-bedroom apartments. I mean, it's just crazy, impossible. And Councillor Barros was right. You know, our senior residents, they have most of their income in their homes. And they might sell their home for $1.5 million or $2 million, but there's nothing that's one level that they could, you know, move into that's a 3-bedroom place. You know, a couple of bedrooms for them, one used as an office, another one for the grandkids when they come over. They need that space. They're used to a lot of space here. It's not like in Asia where the units are small and that's what they're accustomed to. But here we're accustomed to that opulence and that size. And, you know, a young family who has a couple of children, they need 2 or 3 bedrooms, you know, a couple of bedrooms to sleep at least, and another bedroom at least to have schoolwork and so on, especially during these pandemic times when kids are doing their schoolwork from home. And, you know, that might continue into the future. And so congratulations on seeing the vision for the future and fitting into that missing middle, because those 3-bedroom units, I think, not only are they going to be good for your sales, but I also think that they're going to fill a tremendous need in Richmond Hill. And, you know, I can just imagine the kids playing around there with all that green space around. It's going to be awesome. I'm not planning on leaving my home, maybe retiring, but I'm not moving in there. I'm not one of those people that like condo living. I got to be honest with you. I like my backyard. I like my privacy. But for those that do, you're presenting a wonderful option. I support staff. I support the local councillor. I would have liked to have seen a taller building, but respecting, you know, the angular planes, I guess it wasn't possible. I respect the fact that you didn't go underground to disturb any of the environmentally sensitive features there. And I make these comments because I suspect that if there's an appeal to our decision today, that it will go before the OLT. And I want the OLT to understand that I am in tremendous support of this type of application. Kudos to the applicant for working well with staff over what I believe to be probably one of the most difficult applications because of its close proximity to sensitive lands. But it's a good outcome today. It's one we need to stand behind. It's great for the community. And those are my comments for the OLT in case somebody does appeal our decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, Councillor Shepherd. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Munch. Oh, wait a minute. Councillor Munch, you've already spoken. You have to wait for a second round. Councillor Shepherd, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like my colleagues, I too was, I couldn't make up my mind as to whether or not to support this application or not. Obviously, there was concerns from the residents regarding the application itself, and then came the staff report. In the staff report, some of the concerns I had were adequately addressed, specifically the proximity of, the whole TRCA subject and the proximity of the property to wetlands and whether or not those would be affected in any way. And I'm satisfied that the TRCA is satisfied. All I can say is there's still some work to be done. And as Councillor Chan mentioned, I guess that work can be detailed and the details can be hammered out in the site plan stage of the application. And the TRCA still needs to sign off. So there will be some work to be done. It's not a perfect application. No application is. However, in light of the fact that the applicants have worked with staff to revise the plans to make it more palatable to the surroundings, and I get the impression that you're continuously willing to work to make those revisions. At this stage, I'm okay to support this application, of course, pending the extra work that needs to be done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So is there anybody else on the first round? Second round, yeah. Okay, so I'll just make a few comments. I do appreciate the work that's been done on this application, and I must admit, when the council public meeting happened, I was a lot less happy about this than I am at the moment. But I must admit, I'm still not satisfied with a number of parts of this. I mean, on the positive side, I was a little surprised that TRCA signed off. I do appreciate the fact that there is a proposed buffer that's quite large. But, you know, the problem is that is a provincially significant wetland. And with all of the development that's going on already around it and more to come, I suppose, there is a lot of pressure on wetlands like that. And I think it is doubly important in that part of the city to make sure that we're taking care of things like that wetland. And I'm not entirely convinced, and I will fully admit I'm not an environmental scientist by any stretch, but I'm still not convinced that the development there will not have an impact that's negative on that land and the water around it. I guess, at the end of the day, so I do have some environmental concerns, but the main concerns that I have is just the height and density. I get that part of this is above ground parking because you can't do underground parking there because I presume because of the aquifer. But I guess the problem is that the amount of parking you need to support the amount of units that you have, it raises that building up to quite a high height. And 8 stories, regardless of whether it's underground parking or whether it's units, is too much. If the building was less units, you would need less parking, which means the whole thing would come down. And this actually in some ways is similar to the other Bayview application, or I guess it was Bayview and Major Mackenzie application we dealt with earlier today. It's not way outside of the realm of possibility given the policy regime in that area, but it is. And I guess the problem is in an area like that, I would consider that the height and other restrictions that we have in that policy regime really need to be respected, more so perhaps than maybe even other areas of the city. So I'm not okay with this. In fairness, I do appreciate the work the staff's done. I do appreciate the work that the applicant's done. But I don't think we're there yet. And I think that the building is just too dense. It's too big. It's not compatible with the area. And I realize and respect that compatibility doesn't mean it has to be the same. It couldn't be. But that if you look at that photo, the rendering versus anything else that's even in a reasonable radius to this building, it is way different than the kind of built form that people would expect. And I think in fairness to the residents that wrote in, that's the problem, is that the expectation of what they expect in their community versus what's being proposed here is not the same. It's actually a very nice building. From a building point of view and all that kind of stuff. But it's not in the place that I would be able to support that from a compatibility height or density point of view. So I won't be able to support this motion in front of us at this time. So, okay, second round, Councillor Munch, you said you want to speak.
Good day. Just so I'm on the housing affordability group here in Richmond Hill. And the question was asked there, and I think it's when the question is are these units affordable? I'm not really sure how to answer that question because according to different people, you hear different answers: region, city, market, people, Statistics Canada. So people can use, is it affordable housing, or is it housing affordability, or is it affordable housing? So the questions have to be very, very clear, but just so I want to make sure, so for the record, according to Richmond Hill and our housing affordability panel, an affordable unit of housing is $512,900. In 2021, a condo unit average was $618,000, and the market's gone up 18% since 2021. 18% to $618,000, if you want to use that number, puts us in the $700,000 range. So if anybody can find a unit for $700,000 when land prices are at $8 million plus an acre, when we have pricing for construction and a shortage of trades and building materials up in an inflationary world, I think it's unreasonable to say that we expect the builder to go out of business to develop something at $512,000 when York Region just increased their development charges between 11 and 17%, depending on the unit. And Richmond Hill is the highest housing unaffordable places to live. I'm sorry, we're the second least housing affordable municipality in Ontario. So I'm not really sure if I assisted the member's question. I'll go through that again because I said to the Ward 1 Councillor Barros when he was going through, I went too fast. So again, $512,900 is what is needed for people in our community to consider affordable. With median household income, according to last Statistics Canada, at $88,000, that means that the vast majority of people in Richmond Hill cannot afford to live here. You need $200,000 to afford a household income in order to afford a housing unit, according to Royal Bank. So I'm not sure if the question was based upon Mr. Builder, please go spend all this money up front for land. Please go forward and put an application forward. Please go spend all this taxation to allow our government to have all these people on staff. Please go out there and then please sell your unit at a loss. Of course, the banks won't give them enough money for financing for that. Hence the reason why we are having building like Ideal Developments who had to go change their landscape, not sell, because we can't afford it at the market level. And we sitting up here in this beautiful chamber with great microphones are saying, yeah, let's do it. And I say, no way. What are we doing on this council? And what are we doing to make sure that families can live here? You can live with dignity in green space. It was mentioned earlier, where's green space? Holy cow. We have an Oak Ridges Marine Conservation Plan. We have a parks plan. We have a trail and network park. We have lands like the Philip Rawlinson Park that was gifted to us. The David Dunlop Observatory, which we took millions of dollars, could have had differently, but leave it aside. And now you're expecting a market at $512,000 when the market is way different. So are we in reality here? I think, we're all educated people, and I really want to treat people in an educated manner. But when you ask questions to say, Mr. Builder, are you going to provide a house that costs you $1.2 million to build for $512,900? I'm going to say to you, will you give me that? Because I'll buy all you got. Let's be reasonable. Of course, I'm going to support the councillor. Of course, we're going to support housing. Of course, we're going to support how people and families live in Richmond Hill. Of course, they should live in parks. I welcome and support the councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on second round? Okay, we have a motion in front of us. Call the vote. Anybody want a recorded vote on this?
Record the vote, please.
Oh, okay. Councillor DePaulo. Sorry, just a minute.
Not indicated earlier. My apologies. I just wanted to briefly say that as a board member in the TRCA, I really have gained a lot of respect for their processes and the thorough rigors that they go through. The fact that they are supportive of this proposal carries a lot of weight for me. The fact that our staff is recommending approval, I think we have to start with the understanding that there is going to be a building on this site. There's very little we can do. Mr. Mayor, you referenced other buildings around. There won't be. I mean, you've got St. George's, and you've got protected lands all around. This is the one small exception on Bayview Avenue North that the existing zoning is going to permit for a building of some sort on a regional road. So, for those reasons, I will be in support of it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, recorded vote's been called. Mr. Clerk, over to you.
Thank you. Through the mayor, voting on the motion of Councillor Barros, seconded by Councillor.
Excuse me, point of order. So what are we voting on? I was away for a few minutes.
Thank you.
In front of you.
Through Mr. Mayor, Councillor Barros, seconded by Councillor Munch, has moved the staff recommendations on item 1310, SRPI 22.086, and that's the vote.
Was there did he make an addition to that, or was that withdrawn?
Through the mayor, he indicated that it wasn't necessary because the correspondence had
Okay,
already
thank
been
you.
received and then referred to
I
staff.
apologize. I
Thank you.
just wasn't here for that. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Through the chair, voting on the motion, Councillor Barros, seconded by Councillor Munch. Councillor Silovitz.
No.
Thank you. Mayor West.
No.
Thank you. Councillor Liu is absent. Regional and local Councillor DePaula.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Munch.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Barros.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Chan.
I'm sorry, no.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
Yes.
Thank you. Regional local Councillor Prelli. Regional local Councillor Prelli, please.
Yes, please.
Thank you. That motion does carry.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, if I may, I'm sorry, we're carried by,
Thank you. The vote was 1, 2, 4, 5, 5 to 3.
Okay, thank you. The next item before us is a delegation, 12.6, Mr. Jay Shea. Hello, Mr. Shea.
Hello, everyone. What a long day.
Well, I think we can agree on that.
I think so.
Go ahead. You've got 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you to the City of Richmond Hill, their staff, and many of the councillors for supporting the IAC and our initiatives around creating greater access to traditional gatherings, events, teachings, and bringing together our elders, knowledge keepers, artists, dancers, singers. Artists, dancers, singers, and community. As you know, we hosted a successful Indigenous celebration event on June 25th, where we saw north of 300 people come by and support 15 plus Indigenous vendors, along with traditional dancers, singers, and food. It continues to amaze me on how many Indigenous people there are in our area and how supportive our community is. It's a very nice surprise to see Mayor David West and Councillor Chan. Thank you for coming. Councillor Shepherd, I understand that you stopped by as well, although I was unable to formally introduce myself. Councillor Munch, thank you for those Frosties. And of course, Councillor Pirelli, thank you for your continued support. I am in front of you as an Indigenous resident of Richmond Hill that chose to move here and start a family well over a decade ago. And I've been leaving these meetings, leaving many of these meetings, feeling sick to my stomach. I have tried to help this council with the challenges around land acknowledgement since 2019, and all of my messages are there to prove it, and I speak to mostly deaf ears. Am I not Indigenous enough for you? Many of you continue to walk down a path of colonialism. I am sure UNESCO would love to review these videos and see how members of this council approach this topic and do not care about diversity and inclusion and continue to hide behind city reports and colonial approaches. The city has already gone out to consult with Indigenous communities, and someone who will never open a city council meeting is tasked with creating a land acknowledgement, which turned out to be a treaty acknowledgement. So the city staff is tasked to consult again with the Indigenous community, which should have included the IAC, and come back with another report. That was 8 months ago. At one point, we were told by city staff that there was no budget for consulting on the land acknowledgement, and that was the end of the conversation. So after 8 months of building community events, meeting with both Indigenous and non-Indigenous allies, we put together something that was inclusive, respectful, and honors the caretakers of this land before us with a commitment to move forward with reconciliation. The public needs to know that $18,000 of taxpayers' dollars was allocated to a registered charity to consult on this topic. And do you know who this group reached out to consult with? That's right, the IAC. So instead of communicating and collaborating with our group, a service we offered at no cost, members of the city staff went out and did not consult the Indigenous community as stated by A, bylaw 143-21 to be referred back to staff, B, that the staff be directed to further consultations with the Indigenous community on the wording of the land acknowledgement, and C, the staff report back to council on a revised land acknowledgement at a future council meeting. So why not engage with our committee? Are we not Indigenous enough for you? Council, help me out after this. How many days before or after we submitted the land acknowledgement did city staff allocate $18,000 for consulting services on this matter? Here's some free consulting, and most likely the last bit you'll receive. Since 2019, the majority of the Indigenous people I have spoken to about land acknowledgement don't care if you have one at all. You know what they care about? Making sure our neighboring communities have clean drinking water, proper healthcare, infrastructure, better employment strategies and programs, and an education system that doesn't continue to push forced assimilation practices. They don't care if you join UNESCO. The majority of the residents I speak to don't even know who UNESCO is. This may be the last time for me to say this before I do. Thank you, Councillor Chan, Liu, Barros, Munch, and Pirelli for listening to us. Pirelli has not shown to be an ally of the Indigenous community or land acknowledgement. Karen, I am appalled and insulted and sickened by your actions, words, and conduct in your position and the lack of respect you've shown me and my committee. It is not a surprise.
Point of order.
Okay, Mr. Shea, if you can stick to the topic, please. Thank you. No, it's not. We're not doing personal attacks. Go ahead,
please. It is not personal attacks. This is serious, and we've recorded it. Every time an Indigenous person has come to delegate, Karen has either turned her camera away, constantly looked at her phone, or rolled her eyes. Listen, as a resident of Richmond Hill, she and everyone should show respect to the residents, delegations, and the people that pay the salaries. But why would we expect that from someone who's been charged with fraud?
Okay, no, Mr. Shea, I'm
and
sorry.
a breach of trust by a public official.
We're not, that's not the purpose of a delegation. I'm sorry.
It is a purpose.
No, it's not.
Are not even close to understanding the damage of the multiple levels of government that have done to our people. Okay, and you think that creating a land acknowledgement is going to solve all the problems. That's it. Don't pass the land acknowledgement. Don't join UNESCO. We don't care. You say you care about Indigenous people, but you won't even listen to one in front of you. You all have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we wish this council would use them accordingly. You're elected to represent the people of Richmond Hill, not to represent your own
Okay,
interests.
thank you very much, Mr. Bergman. Thank you. We have another, our second delegation on this is Ashley Bergman. Sorry, I meant Mr. Shea. Ms. Bergman, you've got 5 minutes to address council.
My name is Ashley Bergman. I'm the co-founder of Indigenous Action Committee. I'm Cree and I'm Masters of Social Work and have held this for over 10 years. It is an integral part of my job to advocate. I'm here before you because what I have to say needs to be said. I am absolutely disgusted and appalled with your behavior as a council for making us sit here all day long for nearly 7 hours waiting to speak to you. Your council claims to be committed to truth and reconciliation, and yet we've come here time and time again, delegated, listened to all that you've had to say, and it is clear that your council as a whole, with the exception of a few, do not care about Indigenous people and do not treat us with dignity or respect. We have delegated, taken time away from our families, our jobs, our lives to try to teach you how to proceed in a better way. But most of you are not listening. Some of your actions have proven otherwise, and we thank you for that. You know who you are. You aren't listening. We have been given 2 ears, like Jay said, and only 1 mouth to listen twice as much as we speak. And we're asking for each of you to demonstrate your commitment to decolonization and through action. You need to do better. A land acknowledgement that we created that isn't offensive to our community was shared and passed forward through a motion by Carmine Pirelli and was created by our committee. We handed you gold to use before every one of your meetings to put this lingering initiative to rest and do it properly. You spent over $30,000 of taxpayers' dollars reportedly to speak to 4 hours for 4 hours to speak to Indigenous community members, and we're no further ahead than before. The land acknowledgement that resulted was so offensive that we couldn't fathom it being said at a single meeting and have delegated here time and time again. Back in March, we were asked by you, Mayor West, to create a land acknowledgement. We came together, we consulted with our elders, we consulted with our community, and we did it because it was clear that the council needed guidance and we were willing to help. May I remind you, council, it is in no way, shape, or form our duty or our community's responsibility to reconcile with our own community. That is the job of non-Indigenous community members, elected officials like yourself, because the harm done by colonization and continued oppression has been done at the hand of the government and settlers, and you are continuing to benefit from it, each and every one of you. This makes truth and reconciliation and allyship your responsibility, not ours. We were told in a separate meeting that we had with the town that there was in fact no money for consultants. We then learned that this was in fact a lie, as per your discretionary budget that you discussed at the last town council meeting. An amount of at least $18,000 as per the contract that was reportedly signed with your non-Indigenous consulting organization. We find it interesting and question your actions, how consultants were hired without town council's approval or public knowledge, and expenditure in the amount of $18,000 nonetheless. And why was this done when you asked us to create a land acknowledgement, which we have since delivered on? It is your duty to serve the residents of Richmond Hill in an honest and transparent way and to be financially responsible for their dollars. There are many questions that require answers here, and people are watching and people are listening. Your staff sat here before the public in the last meeting, stated that an Indigenous consulting agency had been hired. I'm here to tell you and everybody watching, that was a blatant lie. A simple Google search and review of the organization's website that you hired illustrates this to not be true. As you know, we had our event on the 25th, a day for all people to come together in a way to celebrate our culture, our people, our history in a good way. And I was made aware by only your social media, Mayor West, that you had attended. I appreciate you giving our committee credit for all that we did that day. It was a huge success. While hosting this event, I was pulled aside by a woman and asked if I was, or 2 women, and asked if I was a part of IAC. And when I confirmed, they proceed to tell me that they were hired by the city of Richmond Hill to discuss land acknowledgements and wanted to discuss this at our event. This was absolutely unacceptable. And an Indigenous organization would have known that that is not something that is done. That is not appropriate. They realized quickly as the words were coming out of their mouth that their actions were disgraceful. This was not a place to discuss business or land acknowledgements or the consulting work that they are doing for the city. They then proceeded to tell me that they now realize they should have consulted with their Mississaugas of the credit consultant that they speak to prior to coming to our meeting to run it by them to see if it was appropriate. I suspect the city will now be no further ahead with this expenditure that now totals $48,000, given the complete lack of awareness on the part of the consultants that your city has hired. They can't even appropriately engage with our community. And the fact that your organization that you hired is not even Indigenous run is disgusting.
Okay,
You
thank
had
you.
us before you. I'm not done speaking. You
Ms.
had us
Bergman,
before you,
your time is up.
giving
If you
you
could
a
wrap
land
up,
acknowledgement
please.
and you spat on it. We are asking you to do better. You tossed it aside, something that was carefully crafted and consulted with elders and community members. And like Jay said, are we not Indigenous enough for you? You have to go hiring non-Indigenous agencies and spending $18,000 to do a job we already did, as asked by you, Mayor West. I can assure you, if we were given that $18,000, we'd make it stretch, and it would go into the community
Okay,
and helping
Ms.
bring allies together with Indigenous
Bergman,
people at
Ms.
these
Bergman-
events that you attended yourself. I'm almost done.
Well,
You have
I need
land
you to wrap
acknowledgement
up.
in your possession. We suggest you use it and take action, because you know what? We still have hope, although it's really wavering at this point due to your actions. But we hope that you will actually go from reconciliation to reconciliation and do the right thing. Please stop wasting our time. Our time is precious, and what we have to say matters. And that is why you are not going to cut me off today. Chima Gwetch.
Thank you. All right. We'll bring this back to council at this time. I'd like to just say, I did not ask anybody other than staff to work on an Indigenous land acknowledgement. So I'm not sure where that came from, but that is not a correct fact. So at this point in time, the land acknowledgement motion was put forward by Regional Local Councillor Pirelli. So I would go to Regional Local Councillor Pirelli to get us started on that item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Ashley. Again, you know, you have my support. I'm trying to do the best thing for your community, the best thing for Richmond Hill. You mentioned a lot of interesting things, and I agree with all of them. I think Jay was referring to someone else when he made some comments, but that's okay. He was probably very upset. I want to remind my colleagues on council that we spent the $30,000 in order to get consultation regarding a land acknowledgement. And that land acknowledgement turned into a treaty acknowledgement. We never once used it, and it was then stopped. It was stopped because Indigenous Action Committee members, before they were formed, said that's offensive. We listened as a council, and we never went ahead with that land acknowledgement. And I'm thankful that we didn't. The one thing we definitely don't want to do is offend anyone in our community. It's been said that we have to get this right. We can't take a chance on using this land acknowledgement created by Indigenous people, the only Indigenous people that have come forward and given us this kind of support. Yet, we had already passed a land acknowledgement that was a treaty acknowledgement. And so when we realized we had made a mistake, we as a council, we changed that. And we went to this process. Council was clear to staff. Consult with the Indigenous community, not hire a consultant who's not Indigenous to consult with the Indigenous community. And I understand why Indigenous Action Committee is offended by that. They did the work, they consulted with the Indigenous community, came up with what we believe, and they believe, more importantly, because it's not about us, it's about them. They believe that that is respectful. What would be the harm in starting with a land acknowledgement that is respectful in the eyes of our Indigenous community? if at some point in the future there were to be a concern or a question, oh, by the way, did I mention that since I moved that motion, not one person from the community, Indigenous or otherwise, has stepped forward to say that that land acknowledgement recommended by the IAC that I moved was offensive in any way, shape, or form. And yet here we are, still waiting for non-Indigenous consultation company to do a consultation to bring back a land acknowledgement. I think it's offensive. It's offensive to the Indigenous community. It's offensive to members of council. I move, Mr. Chairman, that we accept the Indigenous Action Committee's land acknowledgement immediately and open all council meetings with it. I further move, Part B, that we cancel the consultation contract that was given to this non-Indigenous organization and pay them what, of course, we owe them to this point, which I believe to be minimal. And I further add a Part C, that the balance of the $18,000 contract go to the rightful recipients of that consultation. And that is Indigenous Action Committee. They've done the work, they've consulted with the community, and they have brought us forward a land acknowledgement that has not been questioned or challenged by anyone. Those are my comments, Mr. Chairman. This is the respect we owe our Indigenous community. And I remind everybody, I was not a big fan of doing a land acknowledgement to begin with, but I've learned over the years, and I respect our residents, I respect their community, and I respect the residents of Richmond Hill. That's my motion. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, do you have that? Okay. Councillor Barros, do you want to second that?
I'll second it.
Okay. Do you want to wait till it comes up on the screen or not?
No,
Okay, go ahead.
I understand.
Go ahead.
I've got the land acknowledgement on my screen right here on my laptop. Let me start by saying this whole process has been a great learning experience for myself. And I can only speak for myself because like Councillor Pirelli said, when this whole started, I thought, really? Do we need this? Are we doing this just so that we feel good? And it's words for us? And in some cases, I think that's part of it. But to be able to hear directly from the Indigenous members of Richmond Hill and to say, if you're going to say something, this is what we're comfortable with. I support this. And I like the wording. It is very clear. It is crisp. I like the last piece where it says, we are committed to ongoing learning and we strive to move forward with good hearts and minds and are committed to do so with gratitude and respect for the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. I like it. I'll vote in favor of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to that? Is the screen not working? Okay, let's just hold on for a second. We were having that problem earlier, Mr. Clerk.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Clerk. Unless you're a professional stenographer, you wouldn't have gotten everything I said that quickly. Oh, okay. You know, it amazes me, Mr. Clerk, that I hear you clicking away. You type about 4,000 letters, and then when it comes up on the screen, there's only 3 paragraphs.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, subject to Regional Local Councillor Pirelli's confirmation, I'm bringing up the motion with clauses A, B, and C.
I'm going to assume, Mr. Clerk, that you've copied and pasted it from its original format, the land acknowledgement. Okay, perfect.
Okay, so we've got a mover and seconder. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to this at this
I'm
time?
still reading it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Councillor Munch, go ahead. You can read it.
That is exactly perfect, Mr. Clerk. I don't know how you do it day in, day out. Amazing.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Munch.
So I have a question on the motion, either through the mover or through the delegates. Okay, my question is, I like the motion, but my question about the motion is, we're specifically saying the land that we meet on today is the traditional territory of ... Are we 100% certain that there are no others, even potentially? Because if we're not 100% certain, could we say something to the context and others and minority others to some degree? Because what we don't want to do is have a situation going forward if one day from now, 1 month from now, 10 years from now, 100 years from now, somebody comes forward and says, hey, I can show you a land treaty claim. Right?
Okay,
I'm asking.
Councillor.
There's been no challenge.
Okay.
Councillor, you've got the floor. Go ahead. You've got the floor.
So can help me? I'm asking, do we know, or what is our confidence rating today based on this? If we're saying this is what we know and this is what we are, and okay, if we're not 100% certain, can we talk about it a little bit?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. You answered my question. I'm good. Thank you. The motion is good. You answered my question.
All right.
I like the motion. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other comments at this time? Seeing none, I will make some comments. The company that was hired to lead us through this process, as far as I understand, is founded by Carolyn King, and she's the past chief of the Mississaugas of the Credit. And there's a number of others. If you look at the bio of the people that are on that group, there are many of them are Indigenous, and some of them are past chiefs or chiefs of different groups. So I'm not sure where we're coming up with the claim that this is not an Indigenous consulting company, and they've done work for many other municipalities, as far as I understand. I don't understand where the $30,000 is being bandied about, but anyway, I'm not sure about that. But the one thing that, I want to be clear to the Indigenous Action Committee. I mean, I understand why they're upset, and you know, they did all the work and they came up with this land acknowledgement. But you know, the staff has gone ahead and initiated the process of hiring a consulting firm to make sure that we understand, because we don't have these resources on councils or on staff. Make sure that we understand exactly what it is that we're supposed to be doing, exactly who we're supposed to be consulting with. And the Indigenous Action Committee would be one of those people, I'm quite certain, or one of those groups. But, you know, the thing is that we tried this once with staff resources and we did not succeed. And we absolutely do not want this to happen again. I fully endorse the idea of hiring a consulting company to lead us through this. We don't have that expertise on staff. And whenever we don't have the expertise on staff in many issues in this municipality, we will hire outside consultants to help us through the process. This is very sensitive and it's very important. But I am quite certain that this group has got some great credentials, very great credentials. In fact, I would be worried if we didn't follow through with this on the reputational harm that this could do to our community within that group in that consulting firm. I think that, you know, one of the things in this ultimately is the product that we're looking for is the land acknowledgement. Absolutely. And we will put this land acknowledgement that we have in front of us as a point of reference for this group for sure. But it's not just the final product that's the thing here. It's also the process that we're going to be going through to make sure that everybody can be confident that whatever land acknowledgement we come up with in the end is going to be agreed upon by everybody. And B, we've done it right. We've asked all the people that we're supposed to ask. We've consulted, because I mean, if you know, consultations with Indigenous communities is really important. And I do know that. I mean, I've done research in the past. That is a very important part of getting to the process. But I want to stress that the process to get us to the final product is also of value to us on council, to our staff, to everybody involved. So I absolutely urge my council colleagues to, unfortunately, I think I need to vote against this motion as it stands here. And the motion that would come up afterwards would be for staff to carry on and carry on in the process that they've started and come back as soon as possible with the final product. And that's where we left it off at the last meeting before this got deferred to this meeting. But I really truly believe that ultimately that is where we need to go. So I can't support A, B, or C, but I would be able to support a motion to send back to staff back to continue with the process where we left off with this consulting firm and get it done and get it done right. We need to put this to bed. We need to do it in a way that we are confident, without a shadow of a doubt, that all the different groups have been consulted, including the Indigenous Action Committee. Those are my comments. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's no more complicated than that. So, Councillor Silovitz and Councillor Chan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions that I would like to speak to because it has been previously brought forward. Through you to Commissioner, to City Manager Jocelyn. Can you tell us from your perspective and what you know, because I'm sure you know much, about the Shared Paths Initiatives organization? There were some comments were made about them which were quite derogatory. And as the mayor said, I would like to make sure that this company, this organization that has been hired, does indeed have the pedigree that we are looking for, and have they worked with other municipalities? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I did provide some context in the memo that I provided to all members of council regarding the Shared Path organization, which does have extensive Indigenous expertise and Indigenous peoples assigned to this project. The mayor has already mentioned Carolyn King, who is the chair and the co-founder of Shared Path. She was the former chief of the Mississaugas of the Credits First Nation and Order of Canada recipient for the work that she has done in the Indigenous community. This company has worked with a number of municipalities, not only on land acknowledgement and the process involved with that, but engaging with the Indigenous communities and assisting to build those relationships through the process, but also on a number of other Indigenous action items as well. So they do have that extensive experience. They do have municipal experience, and they do have Indigenous peoples on their committee.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to City Manager Jocelyn, do you know of other municipalities that have used their expertise?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I am certainly aware of just recently the town of Whitchurch Stouffville that has used them to build relationships with the Indigenous peoples within their community for the development of an Indigenous cultural center. I do have Manager Lise Conde on the panel that can speak to some of the other municipal experience specifically. So
Thank
I'd
you.
ask Ms. Conde to respond.
Thank you. Just to further make further comments on what the city manager just said. As is outlined in the memo from the city manager, Shared Path has worked with Durham Region, Caledon, London, Brantford, Simcoe, many others, and including some in York Region, and as the city manager mentioned, most recently in Whitchurch Stouffville.
Thank you, Ms. Conde. I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure that that was in the record. And I know Carolyn King, she gave testimony at the first OMB hearing for the DDO. So I know her and she's a wonderful person. One other question I would just like to ask to you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Joslin. A reference was made to $30,000 being spent. This is the first time I've heard about this, prior to the $18,000 in the contract I believe it was used in reference to get that our first attempt at the ILA. Could you please go further?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, I am not aware of a $30,000 budget being spent. I've been in this position since February of 2022. So I'll refer to Lise Conde to confirm if there was a $30,000 fee that was paid prior to my getting in this position.
Thanks. For the first attempt at a land acknowledgement that we brought forward to council last year, we did it with staff time and resources, so there was no additional funds spent.
Thank you very much, Ms. Conde and City Manager Johnson. I appreciate that. I just believe that the public record should reflect what the facts are. I agree with Mayor West, and I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else? Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Councillor Shepherd, my apologies. Councillor Chan, you were first. Sure. Councillor Shepherd next.
Thank you for noticing that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Yeah, we have a long day, I understand. And but seriously, I look at a subject, have to be respectful. Respectful in terms of inclusive of all groups. And I appreciate, I believe Councillor Munch may have mentioned it. We want to make sure absolutely clear in doing what we all think is the right thing, but not inadvertently missing someone or missing certain tribes or groups in here. So I just want to caution on that because the way I understood it is that the staff did provide a suggested wording, and we know what happened. So this is the wording comes in from members of our Indigenous community, the Indigenous Action Committee, which I think we all appreciate. Thank you very much. However, I also see the, based on what we just said, the need to demonstrate that the city that has truly extend the reaching out to our diverse communities within our Indigenous population. And so in that respect, I'm not against to ensuring that consultation as widely as possible. However, I just want to, I think I read it somewhere before, is that for the Part A, for example, it's not going to be cast in stone, so to speak. It's a living document. So it could be expanded upon, modified, and changes and so on. It's interesting. I'm not going to advertise for them, but one of the coffee shop I go to all the times, that they have a land enlargement. right in the store in Richmond Hill, in the city. Now, mind you, the wording is very simple. And I would tend to think that it might not be as inclusive as one would like. However, I mean, we all have seen that other public bodies, school boards, and also other dignitaries, particularly at the federal level, and some at the provincial level as well, and some at the municipal level, our colleagues were doing an enlargement at the beginning of the functions. I think we can learn from them. And I'm glad to hear City Manager that recently become aware of Richard Stouffville, have been doing that. And so I would encourage staff to continue regardless of what would happen on the motion we have in front of us. I do have a question though. I believe my colleague just asked about the $30,000, how they come from. So I'm not going to ask a question. I'm not quite sure this is a question for staff or maybe the mover to help me understand. Is the $18,000 in the C item based on the estimate from the Indigenous Action Committee? I'm just curious as to how that come about. I don't know who can help. For you, Mr. Chair.
I'm happy to help, Councillor Chan. Thank you for speaking about the land acknowledgement as a living document. The simple answer is yes. The work has already been done by Indigenous Action Committee. I'll give an example on the second round when I speak. It'll put it all in perspective for you. Happy to answer it now or later on. It's up to the chair. Shall I continue, Mr. Chair? Sure. Okay. So let me give you an example. I have a tremendous amount of respect for our Chief of Staff, Mike Macri-Jorgos. If I asked him and offered him $18,000 to consult on the valuation of a multi-residential apartment building, I'm sure that after great lengths, he would come up with a good answer. He'd come up with a good answer because he'd probably come straight to me and say, Carmine, can you give me an evaluation on this building, seeing as that you're an expert on this subject? And the reason I bring this up is this. As an expert on that subject, I can do an evaluation of a multi-residential building probably in an hour. And you can pay me $18,000 for it and I'll be happy to take it. But the fact is that if I have that kind of expertise, I can do it. What I'm suggesting here is this. If this organization, I forget the name of it.
Shared Path.
Shared Path. If Shared Path has the expertise, as was just mentioned, they've done this land acknowledgement consultation for other municipalities. Nothing materially is going to change. They can, and I believe they can create a land acknowledgement in 20 minutes. They can take one from another jurisdiction. They know who inhabited this area. They know exactly how to do it. They don't need to consult anybody. They can just do it and present it to us for $500. So I think it's offensive to the Indigenous Action Committee that we're paying this other consultant company to consult on something that they already know the answer to. It's really a waste of money.
Okay.
But that being said, the reality is that this $18,000, the work is being done by Indigenous Action Committee, and that's why I put it here.
Okay, thank you.
But the bottom line is that we should embrace this land acknowledgement because, as you said, Councillor Chan, it's a living document. We've had no objection to this. It's not been offensive to anybody. Not this Pathways organization did not say that this is offensive in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, Councillor, I thought this was going to be a short answer.
It is a short answer.
It isn't. I would ask you to wrap up, or you could use your second round of speaking.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the mover try to help, but I'm still at a loss not knowing what the answer is because I asked a very specific how that figures comes.
Well, the answer is that since the Indigenous Action Committee has done the work, they should be paid the money.
Okay, got it. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there's a muddling or the confusion of the issues here. I think we need to separate out the two issues. One, there's a need for a land acknowledgement. We have covered that. I think we all agree that we need to implement a land acknowledgement, the wording that we believe captures the essence of what we're trying to do, that's inclusive and that doesn't leave out anyone. So right off the bat, Councillor Munch's question, did we miss anybody? To which the mover replied, no one has contested this wording. That in of itself gives us reason to make sure that we consult the appropriate people to ensure it's done, the wording in a manner that does not leave out anyone, does not offend anyone, and that it's inclusive in trying to capture the essence of what we're trying to do, especially since this council has taken such a long time to address this issue. So that's the one separate issue. The other one is whether the Indigenous Action Committee should be paid. This is an entirely separate issue. Their work is acknowledged, their work is recognized, and we thank them for their continued commitment to ensuring that their voices are heard in the community and that they defend the Indigenous peoples and their movement and ensure that they have a strong presence and voice. However, to now allocate something, funds that were already spent, mind you, we've all agreed fully within the purview of the city manager to conduct whatever kind, to commission whatever kind of study that's necessary to ensure that what we are asking staff is done properly. Whether or not that needs to be contested, that's an entirely separate issue, which should not be discussed, shouldn't have part of the main conversation, which is the fact that we need a land acknowledgement. For the reasons stated, I think it's really important that we get this right, seeing as we've waited a very long amount of time. And I can't support the motion in front of us. I think we are on the right course of action, and I think we should let the professionals do their job and come up with something that we can all agree on. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor DiPaolo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too am unable to support the motion in front of us. To at this point direct our staff to cancel the contract with this consultant whose chair has won the Order of Canada for their work in Indigenous reconciliation. Boy, that would to me would be quite offensive. I think we're on the right track. I would have preferred that we refer the suggested land acknowledgement here to the consultant that has been hired for them to evaluate and for them to consult with the Indigenous Action Committee here and to continue the work that they're doing. I think you pointed out, Mr. Mayor, very well that the land acknowledgement is just one small component of what we're hoping to achieve in reaching out and through this consultation process. I think it should continue. I'm left with no choice but to vote against this motion. And perhaps I could refer the IAC's suggested acknowledgement to our continued consultation process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Point of order.
Yes.
Is that a referral motion?
I don't know. I don't.
I said I don't. I think it'd be contrary to. I don't want to refer what's on the floor, so I would have to. I think I was clear. I don't have to vote against it, and should it fail, I'll be looking to refer.
Okay, thank you. All right. Anybody else at this point? Okay, Councillor Prelli, second round. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I don't believe, through you, Mr. Chairman, to staff, I believe the direction to staff was to consult the Indigenous community on a land acknowledgement. Is that what the motion was? Can someone confirm that for me from staff, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I did produce the actual motion in the council memo that you all received. The direction was for us to consult on the land acknowledgement. Yes.
And again, I say this with the greatest of respect, nowhere in there did this council direct the city manager to do consultation on a cultural center or anything else for that matter. It was a simple request. Consult with the Indigenous community. We didn't direct any funds to be used, just on a land acknowledgement. We have a land acknowledgement here in front of us. No one has come forward and said that this is offensive in any way. No one from this organization called Shared Paths Initiatives. Ms. King did not come forward and say this is an offensive land acknowledgement. I'm trying to get a land acknowledgement in front of us so that we can start the process. It was you, Mayor West, that said that this is an important part of truth and reconciliation in your delegations before. And that's why we move forward with the consultation. The 30,000 was a figure that was given to us by the former city manager. That's what it cost in consultation. So don't know where the money was spent, how it was spent, but that was a figure given to us. It wasn't the figure that came out of thin air by the Indigenous Action Committee. So we've spent a lot of money on this, and yet we have an acknowledgement in front of us. No one asked the city manager, this council did not direct the city manager to do anything more than consult the Indigenous community on a land acknowledgement. And you, by your own admission, city manager, have stated that you've asked them to consult on more than a land acknowledgement. That's what you said earlier, yes. We can go back onto the tape, and you said that you asked them to consult on Indigenous Cultural Center was the word that you used.
Okay.
So,
Councillor Pirelli,
so let's be clear, through you to the city manager, what is the scope of the work that you've contracted for $18,000? Could you present the contract for us?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I did not retain these consultants to do anything but land acknowledgement. It's in the memo that I provided in front of council. The scope of work for the consultant is in the memo that I've provided to council on the public record agenda. They are not, I was referring to other municipal work in the municipalities where they're doing different things, which includes land acknowledgement, it includes culture centers. There's a lot of work that is being undertaken by Shared Path, but at no time did I state it was being undertaken here. They've only been retained to do the consultation work and present council a draft of a land acknowledgement.
Thank you. So even worse now, if all they're doing is a land acknowledgement, ladies and gentlemen, $18,000 to come up with a couple of paragraphs is outrageous, when it would take anybody in the Indigenous community a few hours of work to come up with. Someone like Indigenous Action Committee, who hasn't been around as long as Shared Paths Initiatives and does not have the Order of Canada, took them a little bit of time to do it. But someone with those kind of credentials could clearly, an expert, could come up with a land acknowledgement in minutes. And yet, we believe it's okay to pay them $18,000 for that. Oh my Lord, I can't support it. I cannot support money going to someone when the job is already done in front of us. It's already here. Vote against giving the money to the Indigenous Action Committee. But please, members of council, do not waste any more money on paying a consultant to go and consult with the Indigenous community of which they claim to be, when they could present this with a few $100s. That is my point. If you're going to give the money, then give it to the people that did the hard work already.
Thank you. Councillor Chan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the discussion move on, it seems to be moving beyond A, which is the land enlargement or some other land enlargement in the future. It's more turned to what extent we do the consultation, with whom we would be retaining or get assistance from. And I look carefully again at the acting city manager's memo that the consultant Shared Path would actually not be able to begin the consultation until the fall of this year. And I'm looking at the calendar. September 14th council meeting is literally before the fall. If my understanding of season goes right, the fall of 2022 doesn't begin a week later after September 14th meeting. So I think it'll be more fruitful and useful of everybody's time, particularly for the staff, since that the shared path, if I understand this correctly, has not begun any really real work or substantial work, maybe only in preparation. But I would like to move a motion to refer this matter to our September 14th council meeting so that staff hear what council members are saying here. In fact, I hope that with all this input would be able to speak to share path, and in the meantime also reaching out the Indigenous Action Committee and also any other potential partners, including municipalities maybe recently have either used share path services or adopted a acknowledgement statement, so that it will be a fulsome and hopefully would be more focused discussion and hopefully more expedient decision making on September 14th. So very briefly, referral to September 14th council meeting for staff to come back on this matter. Was that help, Mr. Clerk, for you, Mr. Chair?
Point of order.
Go ahead.
A referral motion would require a motion to reconsider.
Reconsider? Why is that?
I'm actually, my advice to council is, I'm actually this is a unique scenario only because I would say that firstly, what Councillor Chan proposed is not a referral. He actually said a deferral. He said, refer this matter to September 4th. Under the procedure bylaw, you refer to staff or committee or defer. So a deferral is to the same body, right? So anytime we go to another council meeting, it's a deferral. So Councillor Chan has proposed to defer this matter to the September 4th. 14th,
That's my intent.
Council meeting.
Thank you.
To the other question, and that's an interesting one. Whether a motion to refer or defer would constitute reconsideration. It would be my advice that it actually doesn't. The reason being is that any earlier referral, and first of all, a referral or deferral are procedural motions. They're not actual decisions. They're not what you'd call a decision, an action item, a final. They're procedural motions. So, and they've actually already been acted on. So it wouldn't be contrary to that. It wouldn't change the outcome because they're procedural motions. It would just move it on.
I think only you and I understood that, but go ahead.
Okay, Councillor Chan, I think at this point, you're certainly free to do whatever is procedurally available. But I mean, at this point in time, I don't think this is going to move the ball down the field. I think we need to, we're trying to get something done as quickly as possible. Moving it to September isn't going to be helping to get it done. So that would be my comment. But I mean, you are free to move anything that's procedurally allowed.
If that's the case, I will only request if we're dealing with the motion without opportunity for deferral to September 14th, as I have intended, so that we have a more focused discussion, expedient decision-making. I request that A, B, C to be voted separately.
Okay, is there any other speakers then on the motion that we have in front of us? Okay, does anybody want a recorded vote?
I actually have something I would like to say. If I could just see that on the screen again, please. The deferral. We're not using that?
No, there isn't a referral.
There isn't. Okay, so we
It's
just
just the motion.
that motion. Okay, thank you. Done.
Okay, so we have a motion in front of us, and does anybody want a recorded vote? Okay, Mr. Clerk?
Thank you. I would just, for the benefit of council, Councillor Chan has requested that this motion be separated for voting purposes, which is fine and is allowed for in the procedure bylaw. I do have to suggest, though, that we actually have to do it in a very specific order, just because of the way the clauses work together. Because if, for instance, if you adopted clause A, then actually clause B and C might be moot. If you adopted clause C but didn't clause B, then we're in a bit of a
Point of order.
Yeah.
I disagree with you, Mr. Heike. You would be correct if we adopted clause A, that point C might be moot, but not point B. They still need to be paid.
No, but you can't. What my point would be, and I thank you for the opportunity to clarify, is that if, for instance, you did not accept clause B, then you actually couldn't pass clause C because it's contingent upon. So my suggestion to council for their benefit is that we actually do it in this order, B, C, A.
Correct.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So thank you. Through the chair, voting on clause B of the motion, Councillor Solovitz.
Thank you. I just want to ask the mover and the seconder, it's not on the screen. Could just be refreshed, please?
I apologize. I didn't catch it. 1 second. Oh, it's Councillor Barros. It's like regional local Councillor Prelli is the mover and Councillor Barros is the second.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure of
Yeah.
that. We're voting on which one?
Clause B.
No.
Thank you. Regional local Councillor DePaula.
No.
Thank you. Councillor Liu is absent. Councillor Barros.
Yes.
Thank you. Regional local Councillor Prelli.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Munch.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Chan.
No.
Thank you. Mayor West.
No.
Thank you. That clause fails to carry, and in my opinion, now clause C is moot because it's contingent upon clause B. So voting on clause A of the motion, Councillor Solovitz.
No.
Thank you. Councillor Barros.
If I may.
Yes.
Clause C, we're doing clause C now or clause A?
Clause C is moot. Have no force. Yes.
Okay.
So yes, Councillor, we're voting on clause A. So and so then I apologize, Councillor Barros. I believe I heard you, but I want to confirm.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
No.
Thank you, Councillor Munch.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor West.
No.
Thank you. Councillor Liu is absent. Regional local Councillor DePaula.
No.
Thank you. Councillor Chan.
Yes, to begin the process.
Thank you. Regional local Councillor Prelli.
Thank you, Councillor Chan, and absolutely yes, please.
Thank you. And that clause fails to carry on a tie vote.
Okay, thank you. Councillor DePaulo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Although the way this is presented, wasn't comfortable at this time voting for this land acknowledgement, but it may ultimately turn out to be good for us. I want to refer the suggested land acknowledgement in item A to our consultation process, and that's what I had intended to do. And Mr. Clerk, I sent a motion earlier regarding this item. Could that be displayed? I'd like to move that referral at this time.
Thank you. Through the chair, this is the motion that I was provided Regional Local Councilor DePaula, is that correct? I just
That's
wanna
the
make sure.
one. I tried to save you some typing in meeting. Yes. The ongoing consultation. Yeah, so in my mind, this is an ongoing consultation. And I'm sure IAC will be reached out to, and that this proposed land acknowledgement can be considered in our thorough process. Thank you.
Okay, moved by Councillor DePaulo. We have a seconder. Councillor Silovitz. Did you want to speak to it, Councillor Silovitz?
No, it speaks for itself. Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak to this? Councillor Pirelli.
Sure. What is it? Can someone explain what this is?
You can read it, can't you?
Don't be condescending to me.
No, I'm not. I'm just, it's in
Yeah, you
front of
are.
you. I'm not sure how we can explain it any
Suggest
further
that I
than
can't
you
read.
read
I
it.
can read. I'm asking for an explanation. What is this? Explain it. It says that the proposed land acknowledgement be referred to the city's ongoing consultation with Indigenous communities that was unanimously agreed to by council. Sorry, I don't understand. What are you is the movers and seconders suggesting that we're going to take the land acknowledgement created by Indigenous Action Committee and refer it to the people we're paying to consult for a land acknowledgement so they can approve it in the future? Is that what we're doing? So now we're going to spit in the face of the Indigenous people by suggesting that we're going to take their land acknowledgement and ask a consultation company to approve
I
it?
have a point of information, Councillor
Yeah,
Shepherd.
I'd like to hear it.
Unless I'm on an entirely different planet, this was the exact recommendation that Councillor Pirelli, you had at the last meeting to take your acknowledgement, the one that IAC had drafted, to send it to this group that we had hired for consultation. So this is precisely what we spoke about at the last meeting. Is it not? Sorry, if someone can please clarify for me.
Then we need a motion to reconsider.
I don't think it's the same motion.
Oh, it wasn't. Oh, okay.
I don't think it
Councillor
is.
Shepherd is wrong.
It was a question.
No, you made a statement. You didn't ask. You made
Okay,
a
so can
statement.
I, excuse me? Councillor, who has the floor?
I
Councillor
might not be able
DePaulo.
to read so good, but I hear real good.
The motion is to take the suggested land acknowledgement in item 14.1 and refer it to that ongoing process that we've all agreed to and we initiated back on November 10th, which includes now the hiring of Shared Paths Initiative.
Excellent
Great.
idea.
Thank you.
So I would like to move an amendment.
Okay. It's not your turn to speak. but-
Okay, let me know when it is.
Yep. Councillor Silovitz, did you want to speak to this? Okay. So Councillor Pirelli, you've already spoken in the first. Have you spoken in the first round? No, you have not. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to move an amendment that if we're going to refer this to the consultation process, that Indigenous Action Committee be compensated for the work that they have done in creating this land acknowledgement that we're now using as a template moving forward. I'm open to suggestions on an appropriate fee to compensate them for. What would you think, Councillor Barros? What would be reasonable?
That actually sounds a lot like a motion to reconsider because we just dealt with that in the previous
Oh, absolutely
motion.
not. Absolutely not.
I don't know, Mr. Clerk.
No, it's not a motion to reconsider. The first motion was to give the balance of the 18,000 to them.
Okay.
This one has not
Mr.
about a balance
Mr.
of
Clerk
the
is nodding. So,
18,000.
Mr. Clerk, do you have the wording that Councillor Pirelli is proposing as an amendment?
What would you think is fair, Councillor Barros? You're the smartest guy here. 5,000? 5,000. Councillor Barros suggests that $5,000 for the work that they've done would be appropriate. I think that's reasonable. If we're going to use their land acknowledgement as part of the consultation process, then I believe we owe them an opportunity to compensate them for it. Thank you, Councillor Barros. I'm still in a council meeting. What's that? No, we won't be home
Okay,
for
Councillor
dinner.
Pirelli, Mr. Clerk is asking you a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was speaking to my lovely wife. Sorry. Yes, the same funding source that the city commissioner, the city manager uses for the consultation process. I don't know what it's called. It's a, everybody's invited for dinner when we break and Councillor Barros is paying.
While we're waiting, I think the point of the discussion that we've had up to this point is that because the last motion failed, that the idea here is to continue the process that we've started. I mean, we've talked about using the wording that has been proposed as you know, as input to this process, but ultimately, what we need, I think, is as a council is a motion that just continues off where we stopped. And that is we've hired the shared path. The staff was already going on a route to start with the consultation to come up with this. And we were in process doing this when this all started. What we need is a motion right now to simply say, to direct staff to continue doing what they were doing, leaving off from where we started. This is not that complicated.
Mayor, I'll withdraw my motion to allow another council member to move exactly what you said.
All right. So
I have the
Councillor
floor.
Shepherd, I've got.
Excuse me.
Councillor Shepherd.
Excuse me. I have the floor.
He has just withdrawn the motion.
Okay,
Councillor
and I have
Shepherd.
the floor.
Councillor Shepherd.
Point of order.
Go
And I
ahead.
have the floor.
Point of order.
Yes, Councillor Barros.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I might have missed something. There was a member's motion on the floor and it failed. Why do we see the need to keep making motions?
Because there is no motion on the floor at this point, so we're putting a motion in.
Why do we need one? The city.
Because we are in a
Excuse me, let me
vacuum.
finish.
We are in a
The
vacuum right now.
The city manager has instructions and she's continuing down that path.
Okay, well, actually, that's a good point.
Council never said to the city manager, stop. Those motions failed. So like, I follow the bouncing ball. So
Okay.
please.
Fair enough. Listen, fair enough, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Perhaps I could be assisted. I actually, it is not necessary, I would suggest, to have a motion at this time.
All right.
Nothing that council has done or hasn't done in this meeting precludes the city manager from doing the consultation on the Indigenous action. That's just my suggestion. That is true. There is no limitations. So
I have the floor.
The motion is withdrawn, so we
Doesn't
don't.
matter that the
we
motion
don't
is withdrawn. I have the floor. I was speaking when the motion was
Mr.
withdrawn.
Clerk, I'm going to need some help with this.
And I will be
procedurally.
speaking.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to read an email and I'm going to move a motion. Hello, Jay. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Michelle Buceris, and I am the Special Assistant to Mayor David West. I work with a small team in the office of the mayor. Mayor West has asked me to reach out in response to your Facebook Messenger note to him posting a meeting to discuss some input you have on the land acknowledgement that was
Point of
referred
order.
back to the city staff.
Point of
at the
order,
council
Councillor
meeting
DiPaolo. Go
on the-
ahead. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, just don't understand how a member motion came to the floor, it was amended and failed, and now there's another, now that,
I agree.
how you get a second crack at a member motion?
Yeah.
We should
Okay.
be on to the next item,
You're
I
right.
believe.
You're right. There is nothing on the floor right now.
I have the floor.
No, you
Mr.
don't,
Chairman.
because
You
no,
gave me
no,
the
you
floor.
don't, because now we don't have a
You
motion on
gave
the
me
floor.
the floor.
It's
I'm
been,
moving a
it's been
motion.
withdrawn.
I'm moving a motion.
It has been withdrawn, Counselor.
You're not listening, Mr.
No,
Mayor.
I am not listening because right now there
You
is
don't
no,
want me
there
to
is,
read
there,
the-
no,
You
the mo,
don't want me
the
to read
email,
the email
the email,
where
the
Jay Shea
email.
said you sent him a request, and I'm about to read it, Mr. Mayor, so that you can correct your statement that you never requested it. It's here in writing.
No.
My fear is that the Indigenous Action Committee is going to hold you to your words that you asked them to create
Point
a
of
land
order.
acknowledgement, and now you're going
Point
to
of
be
order.
having to pay
I
them
got
for it.
the email that you're referring
I
to.
can read it right here.
The email that you're referring to,
Yeah.
I've at one point in time, and I did not get a response to that email as far as I can remember.
Can
I
we ask you
asked
that-
them to meet and
We
talk
ask you-
about the land
Let me
acknowledgement.
read
I
it
did
for you.
not ask them
Don't
to
go from
create
memory,
a
Mr.
land
Mayor.
acknowledgement.
Mr. Mayor, you don't have to go from memory. It's right
No,
here.
I got it. Jay,
Can we
Jay
ask-
sent it to me as well.
Point of
Let's
order.
Point of
brief
order,
outline
Counselor
of the
Shepherd.
Counselor
wording
Pirelli
Excuse
has
me,
zero
Counselor
respect
Pirelli.
for
that
code
you
of conduct
think
right now
can
and the
help
Counselor
procedural
Pirelli.
order.
forward.
Point of
And as
order,
soon as
Counselor
received,
Pirelli, you do not have the
Kurt to
floor.
set up a
Point of order,
meeting
Counselor
with
Pirelli,
you.
you are out of line.
Counselor,
The
Point
mayor,
of order,
Lise
Counselor
Conde, who
Pirelli,
is
you
our
cannot be speaking
manager,
right now.
strategy and
Point
government
of order, no
relations.
respect for the process.
Okay.
Should I keep going?
Again,
at this
Mr.
point in
Chairman,
time,
Mr. Chairman,
it
I
is
have the
now,
floor.
it is now 6 o'clock.
We can go on forever, Mr. Mayor. It
is now 6. You don't have the
yes,
floor.
I did have the floor.
There is nothing on the floor at the moment.
I said I'm moving a motion and I was speaking to you. Just don't want the public to hear that you lied to Jay Shea. It's right here in writing.
Point of order. Counselor Pirelli, you need to stop, sir. Please have some respect for the procedure. Please stop.
We ask you to please send us a brief outline of the wording / input that you think can help move this forward. And as soon as received, I will work to set up a meeting with you, the mayor, Lise Conde, who is our manager, strategy and government.
Motion to
relations.
recess.
You asked them, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
Just
thank you.
acknowledge it.
Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to move a motion.
No.
And when I have the floor, I'm entitled to move a motion.
No, we're not moving a motion right now.
You play fast and loose with the rules.
We are going
Mr.
to be
Mayor.
breaking for dinner at this point.
I have the floor.
Okay,
Oh, yes, I do, Counselor Chan. I can hear you loud and clear. I might not be able to read so good, but I hear it real good.
so at this point in time, it is now 6 o'clock. I would ask that we break for dinner till 5 minutes
No,
after
Mr.
7.
Mr. Chairman, I have the floor. Oh, I see. We're just going to try and silence the truth.